Greetings, and welcome back to the channel as we delve into the closing chapter of the science fiction films of the 1930s. While Hollywood embraced Technicolor and celebrated one of its most historic years, the realm of science fiction remained a monochrome, mostly American pursuit, with various box office results. This year, Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff left their mark on 3 of the 7 films, either separately or in a memorable team-up in Son of Frankenstein. We'll travel to space with Buck Rogers, follow a few mad scientists as they get their comeuppance, and watch a creepy performance from future star Humphrey Bogart. By the end of the decade, Hollywood had established itself as the global force in cinema, producing a vast majority of the world's most popular films, with only a few science fiction productions made in Europe, including our first film, The World Will Tremble, a French drama by Austrian-born director Richard Potier, who is best known for his 1935 film Fanfare of Love, which would be remade into the hit Some Like It Hot, directed by Billy Wilder in 1959. Based on the 1938 novel of the same name by Francis Diderot and Charles Robert Dumas. It stars Claude Dauphin as Dr. Jean Durand, a prolific actor best known in America for his later films Barbarella and The Quiet American. Madeleine Solange co-stars as his on-again, off-again love interest, and Erich von Stroheim as Marie France's father. The main plot follows a scientist, played by Dauphin, obsessed with finding a way to predict when people will die. After many failed experiments, he finally creates a machine that can determine a person's death date by analyzing a sample of their blood. He initially wants to experiment on prostitutes or criminals, the lower classes of society. The story takes a darker turn as it explores the moral implications and consequences of knowing one's death date in advance. This pre-World War II French film uses a fantastical premise to examine questions about life and death, which was about to become a philosophical quandary for many French citizens after the outbreak of World War II. This is a well-written film with more talk than action, unlike American sci-fi at the time, and some of the best cinematography of the films I researched for this episode. Not exactly an original idea, but it's handled in an interesting way, emphasizing the public outcry about the machine's existence. The plot is similar to Robert Heinlein's Lifeline, which was published a few months after the film premiered, which is merely a coincidence. It would have been difficult for Heinlein to see the film in May, write the story, and get it published in Astounding magazine for the August 1939 issue. The World Will Tremble is available on DVD and streaming on YouTube. I'll link it in the description below. Before we dive into the rest of the films of 1939, if you're enjoying the content, please like the video and subscribe for more episodes on the history of sci-fi cinema. You can also support my work on Patreon, which I'll link in the description below. Your support means a lot, and I appreciate everyone who stops by and shares their love for this evolving genre. From 1939 to 1942, Columbia Pictures made a series of films with Boris Karloff, known as the Mad Doctor cycle.
How frail a thing to solve the riddle of death.
The first in this series, The Man They Could Not Hang, is an American sci-fi and horror hybrid from director Nick Grind, who was better known as a screenwriter who worked with Laurel and Hardy and Ronald Reagan. Written by Carl Brown, and a story credit going to George Sayre, who would also work on Torture Ship, which I'll review in the next chapter. Joining Karloff is Lorna Gray as Janet, Robert Wilcox as Scoop, and Roger Pryor as Drake. Boris Karloff plays Dr. Heinrich Savard, a scientist experimenting with reanimating the dead. A young man volunteers to temporarily die for the doctor's controversial experiment. But when the nurse, fearing the experiment's failure, alerts law enforcement, the experiment is halted and the young man dies. Savard is arrested for murder, despite his claims of being able to revive the volunteer.
I know your kind. Your forebears poisoned Socrates, burned Joan of Arc, hanged, tortured all those whose only offense was to bring light into darkness.
He is convicted and sentenced to hang. Just before the execution, Savard signs a release allowing his assistant to retrieve his body posthumously. He is revived and his broken neck is repaired. The jurors from the trial mysteriously begin to die. A reporter, Scoop Foley, investigates. The doctor now plans his final act of revenge, inviting the surviving jurors, the nurse who ratted him out, and judicial officials to his home. Savard reveals himself, trapping his guest in his home, and will kill them all tonight, one by one. What follows is a deadly game, as the doctor systematically eliminates his captives. His daughter is mistakenly killed while trying to save the others, and the doctor must use his skills to bring her back. This is a quick and entertaining film. I wish the final act inside the house, as Savard deals with his perceived enemies, was expanded into a full film, getting to know the supporting characters better as the doctor plays his cat and mouse games. It's similar to The Walking Dead from 1936, also starring Karloff, about a man brought back to life and seeks revenge. Karloff, as always, is great to watch, and I recommend this film. The Man They Could Not Hang is available on DVD and Blu-ray, and for free on the Internet Archive as part of the classic sci-fi films from the 1930s Part 1 collection, which I'll link in the description below. Torture Ship is a bizarre, poorly written and directed American sci-fi horror hybrid from a small Hollywood studio, Producers Distribution Corporation, that operated from 1939 to 1947, making low-budget and forgettable B-movies. Directed by Victor Halperin, best known for his horror films like White Zombie from 1932 and Revolt of the Zombies from 1936, the film stars Lyle Talbot as Bob Bennett. I discussed his previous film, Trapped by Television, in my 1936 episode. He would go on to work on The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, as well as Plan 9 from Outer Space. Also starring are Irving Pitchell, Julie Bishop credited as Jacqueline Wells, and Sheila Bromley. George Sayre and Harvey Huntley penned the screenplay. This is Huntley's only credit on IMDb, and Sayre also wrote The Man They Could Not Hang, as well as The Shadow. Two good stories, so I'm not sure what happened to this script. The story, very loosely based on 1,000 Deaths by Jack London, follows a scientist, played by Irving Pitchell, who performs experiments on criminals aboard a cruise ship. He hopes to gain insight into the criminal mind, while also injecting them with a hormone that should take away their evil tendencies. He changes the course of his experiments by injecting the hormone into our hero Bob Bennett, who is working for his mad scientist uncle. The doctor wants to see how the therapy works when someone who starts out as morally good as well as criminals. Two women who are for some reason on the ship, one innocent and one nefarious, also become part of the experiment. The story just starts in the middle, and we have no idea why they are on a ship or how these people even got onto the ship, and what took the criminals so long to mutiny. Thankfully, this is just under an hour. The weirdest thing about this production is the music score that doesn't fit the film and feels like it's from an entirely different genre.
I suppose you killed Ezra on purpose. I suppose you made madmen of Krantz and me just to amuse yourself. I was right. We're a bunch of guinea pigs. You're not going to touch me again.
This could have been a good film in better hands, with stronger actors and screenwriters. The idea of hormone therapy and the endocrine system would become popular in films after a 1938 paper by scientist Louis Berman called New Creations in Human Beings, showing how science influenced filmmakers and storytellers to look into the human psyche.
As you know, I've obtained in this synthetically the active ingredients of the endocrine glands governing criminality. Synthetically, that's just the trouble. Krantz proved it.
Torture Ship is available on DVD and for free on YouTube and the Internet Archive, which I'll link in the description below. Universal Pictures made some of the best serials of the 1930s. The Phantom Creeps, a 12-episode American serial, is a fun but not exactly original story starring Bela Lugosi. This is the first of 2 serials this year directed by Ford Beebe and Saul A. Goodkind. Beebe, known for his mostly B-movies, westerns, and action serials, also helmed 1938's Flash Gordon's Trip to Mars. Goodkind worked as an editor on Flash Gordon in 1936 and the sequel in 1938. The pair also directed the serial Buck Rogers. George Plimpton, known for his work on westerns and serials like the original Flash Gordon, co-wrote the scripts. He would go on to work on The Green Hornet, Superman, and Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe. He's joined by Basil Dickey, another Flash Gordon alum, who also wrote The Spider's Web, which I covered in my 1938 episode. This serial employs the rolling scroll at the beginning of each episode, something we'll also see in chapters of Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe in 1940. The use of scrolling text would later be used by George Lucas's Star Wars films, beginning in 1977. Bela Lugosi stars as Dr. Alex Zorka in his final serial appearance, Dorothy Arnold as a reporter, Robert Kent as Bob West, and Edwin Stanley as Dr. Fred Mallory. I reviewed Kent's previous film, The Gladiator, and Stanley worked on Flash Gordon's Trip to Mars and The Fighting Devil Dogs. A mad scientist with an invisibility belt and a robot assistant goes on a quest for world domination. He is challenged by military intelligence officer Bob West and reporter Jean Drew. As the story unfolds over 12 chapters, the hero confronts Zorka and his gadgets. Lugosi is fun to watch as always, but I wish he was in more of the story. There are similarities to The Vanishing Shadow, which I discussed in my 1934 episode about a scientist with the invisibility belt and the use of a robot assistant. There is also a similar plot point to The Invisible Ray from 1936 about a scientist who gains power from a meteorite that he found while on his travels. The filmmakers repurposed newsreel footage from the Hindenburg disaster in the final episode, which is a little jarring to watch today. Footage from both The Vanishing Shadow and The Invisible Ray are used instead of spending money on new action scenes. Mystery Science Theater 3000 covers the first 3 episodes of the serial.
Are you guys still sure that Lucas was the first one to do this?
The Phantom Creeps is available on DVD and for free on YouTube and the Internet Archive. The description below includes a link to the film and to the Mystery Science Theater episode if you would like to check them out. The 1939 serial Buck Rogers, starring Larry Buster Crabbe, stands as a notable yet overshadowed cornerstone in science fiction history. While the serial itself may not be as widely remembered as Flash Gordon, its influence on future writers and filmmakers is evident. Comparisons to Flash Gordon are inevitable, given Buster Crabbe's roles in both and their premieres in theaters within a few years of one another. But in Buck Rogers, Crabbe's portrayal offered more meaningful dialogue. Wilma Deering was depicted as a stronger character rather than a damsel in distress. Buck Rogers did lack a villain with a stronger personality. Who can really out-evil Ming the Merciless? Produced by Universal, this action-adventure science fiction serial revolves around a 20th century pilot, Buck Rogers, and his young friend Buddy Wade, who awaken after 500 years in suspended animation to find the world dominated by an outlaw army led by Killer Kane. Buck and Buddy help their new friends save the day and re-establish peace. Directed by Ford Beebe and Sol A. Goodkind, the second of 2 films we'll discuss for this year. Starring alongside Buster Crabbe are Constance Moore as Wilma Deering and Jackie Moran as Buddy Wade. David Sharp Kane, a famous stuntman with 4,500 film credits, appears in multiple roles, from a pilot to a sentry to a lieutenant. The 1929 comic strip, Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, was inspired by Philip Francis Nowlan's 1928 novella, Armageddon 2419, about Anthony Rogers, a World War I survivor who wakes up in the future. Like many serials, this production used cost-saving measures by reusing special effects and props from other films, this time from Just Imagine to Flash Gordon. Universal also recycled music from its existing library, including scores from Flash Gordon and Bride of Frankenstein.
Come on, over here.
Although Buck Rogers was intended to be the first in a series, only 1 installment was produced. But Buck would live in other forms. The 1939 serial was re-edited into a feature film in 1953 called Planet Outlaws and aired on television in 1964. A feature-length pilot for a brand new series was released in theaters in 1979, starring Gil Gerard and Aaron Gray. It was followed by a television series that ran for 2 seasons. Buck and his friends had an impact on the genre and future creators. The visual effects and set designs of the 1939 serial influenced future classics like Star Wars, and the episodic storytelling format of many 1930s serials helped shape the structure of television shows. George Lucas tried to get the rights to Buck Rogers or Flash Gordon, but failed, and instead ended up creating Star Wars. Buck Rogers is available on DVD, streaming on Tubi TV, YouTube, and the Internet Archive. I'll link them in the description below if you'd like to check them out. The Return of Dr. X from Warner Brothers showcases an intriguing blend of science fiction, horror, and thriller elements. You may think this is a sequel to the 1932 film Dr. X, but the 2 films are largely unrelated. They are connected by title and theme, but feature different characters and storylines, with the former about a series of murders investigated by a Dr. Xavier, and the latter about a different doctor brought back to life after execution. Directed by Vincent Sherman in his first feature, the film stars Wayne Morris as a journalist, Walter Garrett, Rosemary Lane, best known as part of the singing group The Lane Sisters, plays Joan Vance, and most notably today, Humphrey Bogart takes on the role of Dr. Maurice Xavier, a role the studio contractually forced him to accept. This was Bogart's only science fiction or horror film, and his performance as the sinister Dr. Xavier, though unsettling, is often regarded as miscast. But I actually liked his creepy portrayal and wished he was in more of the film. It was fun to see a future star pop up in a sci-fi movie. Journalist Walter Garrett discovers the lifeless body of a famous actress and publishes a story. When she turns up alive, Garrett's credibility is questioned, driving him to investigate further. He uncovers a series of murders characterized by surgical precision and mysterious blood loss, eventually linking the murders to Dr. Xavier. As the story unfolds, Garrett and a young doctor must confront the resurrected Dr. Xavier, who uses synthetic blood to sustain his life. Warner Brothers wanted to cast Boris Karloff or Bela Lugosi. However, due to contractual limitations and casting shifts, the role ultimately went to Bogart, who was not yet the movie star we know today. An interesting aspect of the film is its exploration of medical vampirism, a theme that intertwines scientific curiosity with horror, further emphasizing the unsettling nature of the doctor's experiments. Instead of supernatural elements, films like The Return of Dr. X feature scientists who use unethical medical techniques to sustain life or extract life force from victims, reflecting the anxieties about medical advancements and ethical boundaries. The Return of Dr. X is available on DVD in collections with Dr. X, as well as streaming on the Internet Archive, which I'll link in the description below.
It wasn't my father's fault that the bee he created became a senseless, murderous monster. He was right. It was the unforeseen blunder of a stupid assistant that gave his creation the brain of a killer instead of a normal one, and how my father was made to suffer for that mistake.
Son of Frankenstein stands as a remarkable entry in Universal Pictures' iconic Frankenstein series. After this film, the series turned into sillier parodies. Directed by Roland V. Lee, this sci-fi gothic horror tale speaks to the ideas of scientific ambition, the consequences of playing God, and the duality of a creature's nature, common ideas throughout the science fiction and horror hybrid genre. Upon arriving at his family's ancestral castle, Baron Wolf von Frankenstein, played by Basil Rathbone, and his wife Elsa, played by Josephine Hutchinson, encounter the legendary Bela Lugosi as Igor, a man who survived a hanging and has been keeping the original monster alive. Igor convinces Frankenstein to revive the creature, hoping to exact revenge on those who wronged him. Lionel Atwill, as Inspector Crow, suspects something is not right with the town's new arrivals, especially Wolf. The standout performance is from Bela Lugosi as the manipulative Igor. Boris Karloff makes his final appearance as the iconic monster. The film's use of German expressionist techniques, including set design, cinematography, dark shadows versus light, all contribute to the haunting atmosphere. The director was not happy with the original script, but Universal wanted this film to be produced. The script was not completed before principal photography began, and portions were written just before the actors shot their scenes. The studio had given up on horror films in the later part of the 1930s due to reduced ticket sales. That was until a Los Angeles movie theater showed a triple billing in 1938 of Dracula, Frankenstein, and Son of Kong to popular audience acclaim. And so, after a 2-year absence, Universal was getting back into the horror business. Universal wanted Peter Lorre for the film, but they couldn't borrow him from 20th Century Fox. Plus, Lorre was not interested in acting in another horror film. Bela Lugosi came in, and the director, Roland Lee, let the legendary actor make the character of Igor his own. In the end, it was a success with audiences and critics, with The Hollywood Reporter stating it was a, quote, knockout of its type of production, acting, and effects, because Lee's direction keeps a chilling, somber mood and the grim humor that's in it. It's hard to pick between the 3 films, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, and Son of Frankenstein. Each are excellent films with their own atmosphere, mood, and standout characters. This could have been a comedic parody of the first 2 films, but it stands on its own. The 1942 sequel, The Ghost of Frankenstein, featured Lon Chaney Jr. as the monster, and Lugosi reprising his role as Igor. I'm looking forward to my episode about the films of 1974, so I can talk about how the Frankenstein films of the 1930s influenced Mel Brooks' classic, Young Frankenstein. Son of Frankenstein is available on DVD, Blu-ray, for rent on YouTube, and a colorized version is available on the Internet Archive, which I'll link in the description below. I recommend checking it out. Science fiction literature in 1939 was entering its golden age, notable by a wave of creativity and innovation. Writers tackled complex scientific themes, futuristic technologies, and advanced storytelling, greatly expanding the genre's horizons. Some influential short stories were published in pulp magazines this year and later in novel form. Almoric, by Robert E. Howard, published in Weird Tales, follows the adventure of an Earthman transported to an alien world where he must fight for survival. The fourth in a series about Kimball Kinnison, Ray Lensman, by E. Doc Smith, is about a highly skilled member of the Galactic Patrol. The first of a short story anthology, edited by Isaac Asimov and Martin H. Greenberg, began its run in 1939. Isaac Asimov presents the great science fiction stories, contain works by the editors, as well as Jack Williamson, Robert Heinlein, Catherine L. Moore, and Lester Del Rey. I want to highlight Iondo Binder's story, I, Robot, published in this first volume. It discusses the idea of intelligent robots and explores ethical dilemmas surrounding their interactions with humans. In 1979, Asimov wrote of Binder's work, quote, "It certainly caught my attention. 2 months after I read it, I began Robbie, about a sympathetic robot, and that was the start of my Positronic Robot series. 11 years later, when 9 of my robot stories were collected into a book, the publisher named the collection I, Robot, over my objections. My book is now more famous, but Otto's story was there first," unquote. This reminds us that all creations, even those by famous authors, build upon stories of the past. Binder's version of I, Robot is included in Isaac Asimov Presents The Golden Years of Science Fiction, 36 stories and novellas, which is available on Amazon if you would like to check it out. One novel from this year was adapted into a television film. Aldous Huxley's After Many a Summer is a satirical story that explores themes of longevity and immorality through the story of a wealthy American who seeks to extend his life indefinitely with the help of a scientist's research. There was a radio adaptation in 1948 and a television movie in 1967. One notable creator was born this year who influenced future authors and filmmakers. Michael Moorcock was born on December 18th. Renowned as a leading figure in modern science fiction and fantasy literature. As the editor of the influential New Worlds magazine in the 1960s, he played a pivotal role in the New Wave movement, promoting experimental literary styles and the exploration of mature themes. His extensive body of work included the iconic Elric saga, Moorcock's creation of the Eternal Champion archetype, and his development of a cohesive multiverse, connecting his various fictional worlds, greatly impacted the genre. The start of World War II in 1939 marked a turning point in history, leading to widespread geopolitical shifts and significant technological military advancements. The war, which lasted until 1945, resulted in the mobilization of millions of troops, leading to human suffering, highlighting the depths of human cruelty. No part of history exists in a vacuum. Culture, history, science, the arts, and film both influence and are influenced by the course of history. To fully understand the sci-fi films of 1939, as well as those of the 1940s and beyond. It is important to understand the global events shaping the collective human experience at the time. For the rest of this episode, I will focus on the world at large and how it played a role in influencing filmmakers and storytellers. Several significant historical events unfolded before the outbreak of World War II. In January, General Francisco Franco's forces captured Barcelona during the Spanish Civil War. The war would conclude in April with Franco's victory, establishing a dictatorship in Spain. On January 24th, a massive earthquake ravaged Chile and killed over 28,000 people. By March, Germany occupied the remainder of Czechoslovakia, violating the Munich Agreement and escalating tensions in Europe. Cardinal Eugenio Pacelli became Pope Pius XII on March 2nd. A non-aggression treaty was signed between Germany and the Soviet Union, known as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. The world was heading ever closer to war, which would begin when Germany began its invasion of Poland on September 1st. Britain and France declared war on Germany on September 3rd. The Soviet Union invaded Poland from the east, cooperating with Nazi Germany in partitioning the country. After almost a month of resistance, Poland surrendered on September 27th. The Soviet Union would then turn its sights on Finland in November, beginning the Winter War. Not everything was about the war in 1939. The cultural landscape of this time was marked by groundbreaking events, some of which carry a lasting impact today. March 30th marked the beginning of a cultural phenomenon in the comic book industry. Batman made his first appearance in Detective Comics number 27. The masked vigilante would influence media from comics to cinema. The landmark World's Fair opened on April 30th in New York, with the theme The World of Tomorrow, offering a glimpse into future technologies and societal advancements, promoting optimism during a time of global economic uncertainty. The first televised Major League Baseball game occurred on August 26th between the Cincinnati Reds and the Brooklyn Dodgers at Ebbets Field in Brooklyn. The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade was first telecast on November 23rd. There were 2 influential novels published this year. Finnegan's Wake, written by James Joyce, is known for its complex, experimental narrative style and its exploration of language, dreams, and Irish identity. John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath chronicled the journey of a family during the Great Depression, highlighting the hardships of migrant workers in America. Lastly, the scientific events and discoveries of the year that contributed to the advancement of knowledge in various fields, from physics to computer science and aviation. Robert Oppenheimer made significant contributions to theoretical physics and astrophysics. He collaborated with George Volkoff to develop a pioneering model explaining the structure of neutron stars. He also worked with Hartland Snyder and made theoretical predictions about black holes, hypothesizing their existence based on gravitational collapse principles. Alan Turing and Gordon Welchman commenced their groundbreaking work at Bletchley Park and would go on to crack the Enigma code during World War II, pioneering techniques that contributed to Allied intelligence efforts. Their innovative approaches to cryptography laid the foundation for modern computing and information theory. John Atanasoff and Clifford Berry began work on the Atanasoff-Berry computer, laying the groundwork for the development of one of the first digital electronic computers and pioneering key concepts that shaped the evolution of computing technology. The Lockheed P-38 Lightning fighter aircraft made its maiden flight, showcasing its innovative twin-boom design and exceptional speed capabilities. On August 27th, the Heinkel HE-178 made history as the first aircraft to successfully use turbojet power. On August 2nd, Albert Einstein wrote to President Roosevelt, warning that recent scientific discoveries indicated the potential for initiating a nuclear chain reaction in uranium, which could lead to the development of highly destructive weapons. Collaborating with physicist Leo Szilard and Eugene Wegner, Einstein urged Roosevelt to prioritize government support for nuclear energy research to prevent Nazi Germany from gaining an advantage in this critical area of physics. Though this channel is about science fiction, I want to highlight some notable non-sci-fi films and industry milestones of the year. The cinema of 1939 is often hailed as one of Hollywood's greatest years, producing a remarkable slate of now classic films, showcasing advancements in storytelling, special effects, and production values. The use of color film was making waves in the industry, demonstrating the medium's potential to enhance storytelling through vibrant color. Capitalizing on the average American's interest in Hollywood, Hedda Hopper's gossip column debuted in the LA Times in 1938, followed by her radio program, The Hedda Hopper Show, in 1939. Hopper provided readers with insider information on the lives of film stars, directors, and producers. By the 1950s, her column was syndicated in hundreds of newspapers, establishing her as a powerful figure in the entertainment industry. The 12th Academy Awards for the films of 1939 were held on February 29th and hosted by Bob Hope. Gone with the Wind went into the night with 13 nominations and won 8 competitive and 2 honorary awards, including Best Picture, Best Director for Victor Fleming, Best Actress for Vivien Leigh. Hattie McDaniel, in her supporting role in the film, became the first African American to win. Robert Donat won his Oscar for Best Actor for his role in the film Goodbye, Mr. Chips, keeping Gone with the Wind from sweeping the top 4 categories. The Cinematography Award was divided into color and black and white categories, and a new category for Best Visual Effects was introduced. Once again, there were no nominations for science fiction films. The most popular films of the year include Gone with the Wind. Based on Margaret Mitchell's novel, it's set against the backdrop of the American Civil War and the Reconstruction era. Starring Vivien Leigh and Clark Gable, their tumultuous love affair unfolds amidst the sweeping changes in the South. Renowned for its grand scale, groundbreaking Technicolor cinematography, and memorable performances, it remains a landmark in cinema history. Dark Victory stars Bette Davis, delivering one of her most acclaimed performances as a young socialite who grapples with a terminal brain tumor. The film adaptation of John Steinbeck's novella of Mice and Men portrays the tragic story of 2 displaced ranch workers. Ninotchka, the romantic comedy starring Greta Garbo as a stern Soviet envoy who unexpectedly falls for the charms of a Parisian playboy, blending sharp political satire with lighthearted romance. The classic adaptation of Emily Bronte's novel, Wuthering Heights, features Laurence Olivier and Merle Oberon in a haunting love story between Heathcliff and Catherine. The Women is a sharp-witted comedy drama directed by George Cukor, featuring an all-female cast led by Norma Shearer, Joan Crawford, and Rosalind Russell, that delves into the complexities of relationships, gossip, and betrayal among New York socialites. John Ford's classic Western Stagecoach starred John Wayne and follows a diverse group of travelers on a perilous journey through Apache territory. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington features James Stewart in a film directed by Frank Capra. It tells the story of an idealistic young senator who takes on political corruption in Washington, D.C. And one of the most memorable films of the year, The Wizard of Oz, is a beloved musical fantasy film that follows Dorothy Gale, played by Judy Garland, on her journey through the magical land of Oz Based on L. Frank Baum's novel, it became iconic for its colorful cinematography and memorable songs. The 1930s were a pivotal time for science fiction films, shaping the genre's future and inspiring modern cinema. Films of the 30s like Frankenstein and its sequel, Bride of Frankenstein, from Universal Pictures, depicted the dangers of scientific experimentation and ethical dilemmas. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and the Invisible Man explored the ideas of identity and power. There were failures like Just Imagine and Things to Come, which may have set new standards in visual storytelling, but didn't sell tickets at the box office. The 1940s was not a strong decade for the genre, but they were stepping stones as we head towards cinema's sci-fi golden age of the 1950s. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more history of sci-fi content, and I'll see you in 1940.